25 forgotten food preservation hacks from the Depression era that kept families alive. How did families eat fresh vegetables in February before refrigeration? The Depression era forced Americans to rediscover ancient preservation techniques that meant survival. Today we're exploring 25 ingenious food preservation methods that kept families fed through the hardest times. Let's start with root cellars with sand bins. These underground rooms maintained 32-40 degrees year-round with humidity around 85-90%, creating perfect storage conditions for root vegetables. Building a root cellar cost about $15 in materials in 1935, about $330 today. But most families dug their own. Wooden bins filled with slightly damp sand held potatoes, carrots, turnips, and beets from October through April. The sand prevented vegetables from touching, reducing rot spread. Families layered vegetables in sand like buried treasure, checking monthly for spoilage. Proper ventilation required 2 pipes, one low for cool air intake, one high for warm air exhaust. Stone or concrete walls prevented cave-ins while maintaining temperature. Some cellars held 500 pounds of potatoes through winter. The darkness prevented potato greening and toxic solanine development. Rural families often shared cellar space with neighbors, dividing bins by household. That underground refrigeration made fresh vegetables possible during 7-month winters. Clamping potatoes outdoors. When root cellars weren't possible, families created outdoor potato clamps, earthen mounds that preserved spuds through freezing weather. This Irish technique required no construction, just careful layering. Families dug shallow pits, lined them with straw, then pyramided potatoes up to 4 feet high. The pile was covered with more straw, then 6 inches of soil, leaving a straw chimney for ventilation. A properly built clamp kept potatoes at 35-40 degrees, even when outside temperatures hit 0. The method cost nothing except labor, preserving 1,000 pounds of potatoes through winter. Opening required careful excavation from the north side, resealing immediately after removing potatoes. Some families built multiple small clamps rather than one large one, reducing spoilage risk. Rain runoff ditches prevented water infiltration. The straw insulation could be reused for animal bedding afterward. By March, families moved remaining potatoes to cellars before spring thaws. This outdoor storage freed cellar space for other vegetables. That simple earthen technology preserved tons of food without any infrastructure. Storing carrots in damp sand. Wooden crates packed with moist sand turned any cool corner into carrot storage, keeping them crisp from harvest until spring planting. The sand needed specific moisture, damp enough to squeeze without dripping. A bushel of carrots required 50 pounds of clean sand, costing 10 cents in 1936, about $2.20 today. Families layered carrots horizontally, never touching, with 2 inches of sand between layers. The sand drew moisture from carrots slowly while preventing complete dehydration. Basement corners maintaining 33-35 degrees worked perfectly. Some families added a tablespoon of slaked lime per box, preventing rot. Carrots stored this way retained vitamin A better than canned versions. The method also worked for beets, parsnips, and turnips. Monthly inspection removed any soft spots before spreading. City apartment dwellers used this technique in fire escapes during winter. Restaurants bought sand-stored carrots at premium prices for superior quality. That moisture balance between too wet and too dry required experience but preserved nutrients economically. Spring houses over creeks. Families lucky enough to have spring-fed creeks built small structures where cold water naturally refrigerated dairy and produce. These spring houses maintained 45-50 degrees year-round, with water flowing through stone troughs. Construction cost about $25 in 1933, about $560 today, For a basic 8x10 structure, crocks of milk and butter sat directly in running water, staying fresh for days. Wire baskets suspended in flow held eggs and vegetables. The constant water movement prevented stagnation and bacterial growth. Some elaborate spring houses had multiple levels for different temperature needs. Families shared spring house access, scheduling usage times. The structures needed monthly cleaning to prevent algae growth. Spring houses also provided fresh water for household use. Pennsylvania Dutch communities perfected spring house design over generations. Insurance companies charged lower premiums for farms with spring houses versus ice houses. During power outages, modern families rediscovered abandoned spring houses, still functioning perfectly. That free, perpetual cooling system required no energy except gravity. Ice house block saving. Cutting ice from frozen ponds in January, families stored blocks in sawdust-insulated buildings, maintaining ice through August. A 12-by-12 ice house held 20 tons, enough for a family plus sales income. Harvesting required specific conditions. Ice at least 12 inches thick, clear without snow cover. The 1934 ice harvest employed thousands during peak unemployment. Blocks weighing 100 pounds were scored, cut, and floated to shore using pike poles. Sawdust, free from lumber mills, provided insulation when packed 18 inches thick around stacked ice. Proper drainage prevented meltwater from accelerating loss. Families lost only 25% of ice through summer with good insulation. The ice sold for 25 cents per 100 pounds in July 1935, about $5.50 today. City ice delivery supported rural ice house operations. Some ice houses doubled as summer recreation spots, selling ice cream made with stored ice. The invention of electric refrigerators destroyed the ice industry within a decade. That laborious winter work provided year-round refrigeration and income. Water glassing eggs. Fresh eggs submerged in sodium silicate solution, called water glass, remained edible for 8 months without refrigeration. A quart of sodium silicate cost 30 cents in 1932, about $6.60 today, preserving 15 dozen eggs. The solution sealed shell pores, preventing air and bacteria entry. Only perfectly fresh eggs worked. Even day-old eggs might spoil. Families mixed 1 part sodium silicate with 9 parts boiled, cooled water in crocks. Eggs were layered carefully, covered by 2 inches of solution. The sealed crocks stayed in cool cellars at 40-60 degrees. Water-glassed eggs looked and tasted normal when cracked, though whites didn't whip well. Spring's cheap eggs preserved for winter when prices tripled. Some families preserved 50 dozen eggs annually. The method required no daily maintenance, just protection from freezing. Commercial operations water-glassed millions of eggs for bakeries. By 1950, refrigeration made water glassing obsolete, though some preppers still use it. That simple chemistry extended seasonal abundance through scarcity. Lime water egg storage. Pickling lime mixed with water created another egg preservation solution, sealing pores while adding calcium to shells. This method cost less than water glassing. 5 cents of lime in 1935, about $1.10 today, preserved 10 dozen eggs. Families mixed 2 pounds of slaked lime with 5 gallons of water, letting it settle overnight. Clean, fresh eggs submerged in clear lime water lasted 6 months. The alkaline solution prevented bacterial growth while strengthening shells. Eggs required turning monthly to prevent yolk settling. The lime precipitate at container bottoms was left undisturbed. Retrieved eggs needed thorough washing before use. Some families added salt for extra preservation. The technique worked in any waterproof container, crocks, barrels, or galvanized tubs. Lime water eggs maintain nutrition better than dried alternatives. Rural schools taught both water glassing and lime water methods. The calcium absorption made shells so hard they required firm cracking. That alkaline preservation provided protein security through winter months. Which of these ingenious preservation methods surprises you most? Paraffin-sealed jams. Melted paraffin wax poured over hot preserves created airtight seals that kept jams fresh for years, though this method isn't recommended today. Household paraffin cost 10 cents per pound in 1937, about $2.10 today, sealing dozens of jars. Families melted wax in double boilers, never over direct heat due to fire risk. The technique required filling jars within quarter-inch of top with boiling jam, then immediately covering with 1/8 inch of melted paraffin. As wax cooled, it contracted, creating vacuum seals. Some families added second wax layers for insurance. The method worked for high-sugar, high-acid preserves only. Mice and insects couldn't penetrate wax seals. Storage required cool, dark locations to prevent wax softening. Opening required running knife around edges, lifting wax discs intact. For reuse, the removed wax went back into melting pots. By 1950, improved jar lids made paraffin obsolete. Health authorities now warn against paraffin sealing due to botulism risks. That seemingly simple technique required precise timing and temperature control. Open kettle canning. Before modern canning knowledge, families ladled boiling foods directly into hot jars, hoping heat alone would create seals, a practice now known to be unsafe. This dangerous method seemed logical when bacteria understanding was limited. Families boiled fruits or tomatoes in large kettles, then quickly transferred to sterilized jars. The filled jars were inverted briefly, supposedly sterilizing lids with food heat. About 30% of jars failed to seal properly, requiring immediate consumption. Even sealed jars often harbored dangerous bacteria. The 1935 USDA bulletin finally warned against open kettle canning, but rural families resisted change. Many attributed survival to luck rather than recognizing spoilage signs. Food poisoning was common but often undiagnosed. The method persisted because it saved fuel compared to water bath processing. Extension services conducted demonstrations proving proper canning's superiority. By 1940, pressure canner sales indicated acceptance of safer methods. That gradual education process took decades to overcome traditional practices. Water bath canning crocks. High-acid fruits and pickles achieved shelf stability through boiling water processing in special crocks or wash boilers. A water bath canner cost $2.50 as in 1934, about $55 today, or families improvised with existing equipment. The method required complete jar submersion with 2 inches of water coverage. Processing times varied from 10 minutes for jams to 45 minutes for whole tomatoes. Wood stove management maintained steady boiling throughout processing. Altitude adjustments added minutes for every 1,000 feet elevation. The jar rack prevented bottom contact with pot, ensuring even heating. Families processed hundreds of jars during harvest season, working in efficient assembly lines. Steam burns were constant hazards in hot kitchens. Proper seal testing, pressing center shouldn't flex, prevented spoilage disappointments. Failed seals meant immediate reprocessing or refrigeration. The distinctive pop of cooling jar sealing became success's sound. Church groups held canning bees, sharing equipment and knowledge. That mastery of temperature and timing preserved summer's bounty safely. Early pressure canning. Low-acid vegetables and meats required pressure canning for safety, though early canners were temperamental and sometimes dangerous. A pressure canner cost $12 in 1933, about $270 today, a significant investment for struggling families. The weighted gauge jiggled at correct pressure, 10 pounds for most foods at sea level. Processing required constant stove adjustment, maintaining steady pressure. Sudden pressure changes caused jar breakage and food loss. The rubber Gaskets required annual replacement at 50 cents each. Families feared pressure canners after occasional explosions made headlines. County extension agents demonstrated safe operation at Grange halls. Green beans, corn, and meat required 60-90 minutes processing. Cooling happened naturally. Forcing pressure release caused siphoning. Testing included checking jar seals and watching for bulging lids indicating spoilage. One pressure canner could preserve a winter's worth of vegetables. By 1940, improved safety features made pressure canning standard. That scientific advancement made year-round vegetable variety possible. Sauerkraut in stone crocks. Shredded cabbage fermented with salt in large crocks, creating probiotic-rich sauerkraut that lasted months without refrigeration. A 10-gallon crock cost $1.50 in 1936, about $33 today, producing 40 pounds of kraut. Families shredded cabbage finely, mixing with coarse salt at 3 tablespoons per 5 pounds. The salted cabbage was pounded until brine covered it completely. A plate weighted with clean rocks kept cabbage submerged during fermentation. The 3-week fermentation required 65-75-degree temperatures. Daily skimming removed surface scum without disturbing underlying kraut. The distinctive sour smell permeated houses during processing. Some families added caraway seeds or apples for variation. Properly fermented kraut prevented scurvy with its vitamin C content. German families maintained old-world recipes through generations. Failed batches turned black or slimy, requiring disposal. Successful kraut transferred to jars for cold storage. That ancient fermentation technique provided vegetables and probiotics through winter. Dill pickles in barrels. Whole cucumbers brined in wooden barrels with dill and spices created shelf-stable pickles without canning. A 30-gallon barrel cost $2 in 1935, about $44 today, holding 150 pounds of pickles. The brine required exact proportions, 1 pound of salt per gallon of water. Grape leaves or oak leaves added tannins, keeping pickles crisp. The fermentation took 3 weeks at room temperature. Barrel placement in cool cellars slowed fermentation after initial souring. Families ladled out pickles as needed, keeping remainder submerged. Some operations sold pickles directly from barrels at 2 cents each. The brine grew stronger through evaporation, requiring dilution. Immigrant communities maintained ethnic pickle variations, Jewish kosher dills, Polish ogórki. Wooden barrels imparted unique flavors unmatched by modern methods. The pickles lasted through winter if kept cool and submerged. Barrel cooperage was a skilled trade supporting food preservation. That bulk fermentation fed families economically while providing beneficial bacteria. Leather breeches beans. Green beans threaded on strings and air-dried created leather breeches. Leathery pods that reconstituted into flavorful winter meals. This Appalachian technique cost nothing except thread and labor. Families strung whole young beans using large needles, creating 6-foot garlands. The strings hung from porch rafters or attic beams for 3 weeks. Proper drying required good air circulation and protection from rain. The dried beans turned gray-brown and felt like leather. Storage in flour sacks protected from insects and moisture. Reconstitution required overnight soaking, then hours of simmering with ham hocks. The concentrated flavor exceeded fresh or canned beans. Some families smoked the drying beans for additional preservation and taste. A bushel of fresh beans produced 5 pounds dried. Children earned pennies stringing beans during harvest. Modern Appalachian restaurants serve leather breeches as heritage cuisine. That simple dehydration preserved nutrients while concentrating flavors. Share your family's Depression-era food preservation stories below. Apple rings on clotheslines. Sliced apples threaded on strings or spread on screens dried into chewy rings that stored in flour sacks for months. Families used imperfect apples, avoiding waste while creating portable snacks. The preparation required coring and slicing apples 1/4 inch thick. Some families dipped slices in salt water, preventing browning. Others preferred natural oxidation. Sulfuring involved burning sulfur beneath drying apples, controversial but effective. The rings hung on porches, in attics, or near wood stoves. Full drying took 4 to 7 days, depending on weather and thickness. Properly dried rings felt leathery, bending without breaking. A bushel of apples produced 3 pounds dried, concentrating sweetness naturally. Storage required protection from humidity and insects. The rings reconstituted in pies or eaten as candy. Some families ground dried apples into flour for baking. Pennsylvania Dutch Schnitz und Knepp used dried apples with dumplings. Commercial apple drying supported many farm families. That waste reduction created nutritious preservation without sugar or canning. Sun-dried fruit leathers. Mashed fruit spread thin on sheets, and sun-dried created fruit roll-ups decades before commercial versions. The technique required only fruit sunshine and clean surfaces. Overripe fruit, unmarketable but perfectly edible, was cooked until soft. The puree was strained, removing seeds and skins. Some families added honey, others relied on natural fruit sugars. The puree spread 1/4 inch thick on oiled surfaces, sheets, boards, or screens. Cheesecloth protected from insects while allowing air circulation. Direct sun-dried leather in 2 to 3 days, depending on humidity. The leather peeled off in sheets when properly dried. Rolling in waxed paper or cornstarch prevented sticking. Stored in tins, fruit leather lasted a year. Children preferred these to penny candy during hard times. Combinations like appleberry or peach plum created unique flavors. The concentrated nutrition provided energy for fieldwork. That zero-waste technique transformed surplus into storable. Treats. Oven or stovetop dehydrating. Pilot lights in gas ovens and wood stove warmth dried herbs, vegetables, and meat without additional fuel costs. The consistent low heat worked perfectly for dehydration. Herbs bundled and hung from oven racks, dried in days. Sliced vegetables on screens placed above wood stoves, dried overnight. The technique required temperatures between 100 to 140 degrees. Oven doors stayed slightly open for air circulation. Wood stove dehydration happened continuously during winter heating. Corn cut from cobs and spread on sheets created leather-like sheets. Reconstituted dried corn made hominy or cornmeal. Tomatoes halved and salted, dried into intense flavor bombs. Mushrooms strung on threads hung near stoves. Dried vegetables weighed 10% of fresh, saving storage space. Soup mixes combined dried vegetables in jars. The constant warmth of Depression-era kitchens enabled year-round preservation. That energy efficiency maximized existing heat for food security. Smokehouse curing. Cold and warm smoking combined with salt cured hams, bacon, and fish, lasting months without refrigeration. Building a smokehouse cost $10 in materials in 1934, about $220 today. The structure required specific design, firebox separate from smoking chamber. Hickory, apple, or oak provided best smoke flavors. Cold smoking at 70-90 degrees took weeks, but preserved longer. Warm smoking at 100-140 degrees worked faster, but required quicker consumption. Hams required 3 days of salt per pound before smoking. The salt drew moisture, while smoke created protective surface. Properly smoked meat developed characteristic mahogany color. Some families sold smoked meats for cash income. The smokehouse also preserved fish, cheese, and salt. Temperature management prevented cooking while ensuring preservation. Spring smoking preserved meat through summer without refrigeration. Virginia and Tennessee developed distinct regional smoking traditions. That ancient technique created complex flavors impossible through modern methods. Salt pork and brine barrels. Pork bellies and shoulders packed in coarse salt or strong brine barrels preserved meat for months. A 50-gallon barrel setup cost $3 in 1933, about $66 today, preserving whole hogs. The dry salt method layered meat with inch-thick salt, requiring 8 pounds per 100 pounds of meat. Brine method dissolved salt until eggs floated, then submerged meat completely. Both required cool storage below 40 degrees. The meat turned gray but remained safe indefinitely if kept covered. Families removed pieces as needed, soaking overnight before cooking. The leftover salt was reused for additional batches. Salt pork flavored beans, greens, and cornbread throughout winter. The rendered fat provided cooking grease when butter was unavailable. Some families added sugar and spices, creating sugar-cured variations. Navy contracts for salt pork supported many farms. The high sodium content concerned nobody during physical labor era. That simple salting fed armies and civilians for centuries. Corned beef tubs. Tough beef cuts transformed into tender corned beef through weeks of brining in wooden tubs or crocks. The process used undesirable cuts, like brisket, making them palatable and preservable. The brine required salt, sugar, saltpeter for color, and pickling spices. A 5-gallon crock cost 75 cents in 1936, about $6.50 today, processing 25 pounds of beef. The meat required complete submersion for 2-3 weeks at 36-38 degrees. Daily turning ensured even curing throughout thick pieces. The finished corned beef lasted months in fresh brine. Boiling with cabbage and potatoes created complete meals. Jewish immigrants introduced pastrami variations using similar techniques. Some families sold corned beef to delicatessens for cash. The curing process tenderized tough connective tissues. Leftover brine started next batches, developing complex flavors. St. Patrick's Day meant nothing without home corned beef. That transformation of cheap cuts into delicacies maximized resources. Potting meat under fat. Cooked meat packed tightly in crocks and sealed beneath thick lard layers blocked oxygen, preserving meat for months. This French technique, called confit, required specific procedures. Meat was salted overnight, then slowly cooked in its own fat. The cooked meat packed in crocks without air pockets. Hot rendered fat poured over covered meat by 2 inches. The cooled fat created airtight seals, preventing spoilage. Stored below 50 degrees, potted meat lasted 6 months. Retrieving meat required breaking fat seals, then resealing remainder. The fat was reused for cooking after meat consumption. Duck, goose, and pork worked best due to high fat content. Some families added herbs and spices for variety. The concentrated flavors intensified during storage. Potted meat spread on bread provided quick meals. Restaurant chefs now recreate these techniques as gourmet cuisine. That fat sealing method predated refrigeration by centuries. Clarified butter in crocks. Removing milk solids from butter created ghee that stored for months without refrigeration. The process required slow heating until foam formed, then straining. A pound of butter yielded 13 ounces of ghee, concentrating the fat. Proper clarification removed all moisture, preventing rancidity. Stored in covered crocks, ghee lasted 6 months at room temperature. The high smoke point made ghee superior for frying. Some families aged ghee, developing complex nutty flavors. The absence of milk proteins meant lactose-intolerant people could consume it. Ghee provided concentrated calories, 120 per tablespoon. Pennsylvania Dutch called similar product drawn butter. The clarified butter sealed other preserved foods from air. Mixed with herbs, ghee became medicinal salves. Religious ceremonies used ghee for lamp oil. That simple clarification extended butter's life exponentially while improving cooking properties. Waxed or cloth-bound cheese. Coating cheese wheels in wax or wrapping in vinegar-soaked cloth prevented mold while allowing proper aging. Commercial cheese wax cost 15 cents per pound in 1935, about $3.30 today. Families dipped cheese repeatedly, building protective layers. Cloth binding used muslin soaked in vinegar, then rubbed with salt. The technique required 55-60-degree storage with 80% humidity, properly stored wheels aged for years, developing sharp flavors. Some families made cheese specifically for aging, knowing value increased. The wax prevented moisture loss while allowing gas exchange. Cloth-bound cheeses developed distinctive rinds, contributing flavor. Monthly turning prevented moisture accumulation on bottom surfaces. Cut surfaces were re-waxed, maintaining protection. Cooperative creameries aged members' cheeses in common caves. Some wheels became family heirlooms, passed through generations. That patient aging created complex flavors impossible in fresh cheese. Vinegar syrups for fruit. Heavy vinegar sugar syrups preserved peaches, pears, and berries for months without canning. The acid-sugar combination prevented bacterial growth naturally. Basic syrup mixed equal parts vinegar and sugar, heated until dissolved. Fruit layered in crocks was covered completely with cooled syrup. The high acid required glass or ceramic containers, never metal. Stored in cool cellars, preserved fruit lasted through winter. The tangy sweet fruit made distinctive pies and cobblers. Some families added spices, cinnamon, cloves, ginger. The fruit absorbed flavors while releasing juices into syrup. Leftover syrup became shrubs, colonial-era fruit drinks. German communities made rum top using similar principles with alcohol. The technique required no special equipment or skills. Children helped gather and prepare fruit for preserving. That sweet-sour preservation created unique flavors, lost to modern palates. Alcohol-preserved fruit jars. Cherries, peaches, and pears, covered with brandy, rum, or whiskey, created instant desserts lasting indefinitely. During Prohibition, medicinal alcohol preserved fruit legally. A pint of brandy cost $1 in 1933, about $22 today, after repeal, preserving 3 pounds of fruit. Clean fruit packed in jars was covered completely with alcohol. Sugar added to taste, usually cup per quart. The sealed jars required occasional shaking, distributing flavors. After 3 months, fruit was brandy-soaked perfection. The boozy fruit topped ice cream or cakes. The flavored alcohol became cordials for special occasions. Some families maintained rum-top crocks, adding fruit layers throughout summer. Brandied fruit improved with age, some keeping for decades. Holiday gifts often included decorated jars of preserved fruit. Restaurant owners bought home-preserved fruits for desserts. That alcohol preservation combined preservation with luxury, creating special occasion treats from common fruit. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane, exploring these 25 Depression-era food preservation hacks. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe.